If respect is an issue in your classroom, join the club. A lot of teachers are going through this, especially nowadays. And I feel like every teacher has gone through this at least at some level. So in today's video, I am sharing 4 steps on how you can build and cultivate respect in your classroom starting today. Hey, teacher friends, Michelle Holiday here. I am a behavior strategist and I help schools, teachers, districts, and youth organizations learn strategies and systems on how they can manage their students and their learning environments with less stress and less struggle. And in today's video, I am talking all about how to build and cultivate respect in your classroom. Now, these strategies will be overall general strategies that you will need to customize for your classroom and your grade level. So that means taking what I share and saying, okay, how can I apply this to my classroom today? So you ready to get started? Let's begin. Strategy number 1. So if you want to build and cultivate respect in your classroom, first thing you need to do is to set the ground rules. Not every student who comes into your classroom will know what respect is and how to be respectful, regardless of their age, regardless of their grade level. Because some principles and concepts that we learned as kids back in the day, that is not happening in the now. Also, the line for what respect is kind of blurry depending on which student you're interacting with. So what I've learned to do and what I teach other teachers to do is to set the ground rules for your learning environment. So define what is respect and what does that look like, sound like, and feel like in your classroom. How are our students going to know how to be respectful if you have not taught them? So I make no assumptions. Even if we're in high school, we're going to talk about what is respect, what does that look like, sound like, feel like, and there's a process that goes with that. But how can you move forward if you don't know the rules? Step number 2, model it with your students. Usually this is something that we do like in the first months of school. But let me just tell you, there's nothing wrong with coming back and doing a refresher. So what do I mean by that? When I say model it, have the students act it out. Set up situations where students have to talk about how to be respectful in a situation. Now, you can do this with them actually physically acting it out. You can give them like discussion cards and the table has to come up with ways of being respectful. You can have students, if they're younger, maybe write a sentence, do a coloring thing, share at circle time. So it's really important to consider, how can I model this? How can my students practice this? How can I get a sense of where they're thinking? How can I get a sense of what their perspective is? Talking is not enough. Let me say that one more time. Talking about respect is not enough. They're going to have to engage with the principal. It's almost like talking about an academic concept that you're trying to teach and expecting them to know how to do it. No, they have to write it out, practice it. Then you ask questions about it, even quiz it to some extent. The same concept with behavior. So step number 2, model what you want to see. Step number 3, expect it. As a teacher, you're going to have to stop saying, you know what, there's nothing I can do. I taught them one time, they're not doing it, there's nothing I can do. Stop throwing up your hands and giving up. Stay with your expectation. Keep your expectation up high and allow your students to move towards that expectation. Now, you may not make it by the end of the year, but you definitely will see progress. And step number 4, reinforce it. So if you've been in teaching for a while, you've heard of these terms like positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. But really, reinforcement means to make something stronger, right? So how can we make respect stronger in our classroom? And that is by following up with reinforcement. Now, positive reinforcement means it's something that you add to them, you add to their situation. So whether it's points, verbal praise, a tangible reward, a symbol reward like a ticket that leads to something at the end of the week. So if you want to make respect stronger, one of the ways is to positively or add something to them once they demonstrate the behavior. Then we talk about negative reinforcement, which means taking something away. So maybe taking points away, maybe removing them from the situation. That would be an example of negative reinforcement, meaning you're making it stronger by taking something away. For some of you, you're going to have to navigate this based on what your school or your district is supporting in the moment. And before you go, I want to share a couple of ground rules that I have used in the past when it comes to respect. Ground rule number one, we call each other by our name. So some of the disrespectful behaviors can be calling students out of their name, whether it's a profanity word or just an insulting word. And so what I've said is, no, we call each other by the name. So if you're not calling them by their name, you're being disrespectful. Number two, insults are unacceptable. I had to start doing this when my students would work in small groups and they began to insult one another. Of course, if you're going to make something unacceptable, you're going to have to teach them what is acceptable. So I had to begin to teach students what they could say when they are in a small group and certain situations happen. Another ground rule is waiting your turn is non-negotiable. A lot of times my students want to talk over one another, disrespectful. And so therefore I had to start implementing, this is the rule, waiting your turn is non-negotiable. And so it allowed us to have an environment where we could call out one another if we didn't wait our turn. So there you have it, 4 steps on how to build and cultivate respect in your classroom. As someone who has built and cultivated respect in multiple classrooms, this is not something that takes hours of your day, but it is a step-by-step process that happens and builds over time. And by the time you've built the culture of respect, you don't have to talk about it every day, but you do have to have reminder sessions to let the students know, hey, we're still about respect in this classroom. How do you cultivate respect in your classroom? Feel free to share this in the comments below, and I will see you in my next video.